and welcome to the next episode of the 6 months of silver clay with me, Emma Roy, in partnership with Kernowcraft. I'm so excited today because I'm going to be bringing you an abundance of different techniques. I'm going to be showing you how to use textures in your work, how to make embellishments, and how to make bails. I'm also going to show you how to refine and fire your pieces, and then how to add a little depth and pop of colour with some liver of sulphur. So what are you going to need for this project? Well, you're going to need some art clay silver. I'm going to be using fine silver, which is art clay 999. I'm going to use about 7 grams for this project. I'm also going to be using some art clay silver paste. This is great to stick everything together. I'm going to be using a Teflon texture mat. This is great, this mat, to be able to transfer my pieces while they're drying. I'm going to be using spacers or playing cards. So I've got 4 cards thick and 3 cards thick. I'm going to be using an acrylic roller, a little straw to be able to make your bail, some water and a paintbrush, some release agent, so either olive oil on a sponge or some Cool Tools Cool Slip or Badger Balm. I'm going to be using a template, but you may want to use cutters, and with using my template I'm also going to use my needle tool to cut it out. I'm going to be making tiny embellishments, and there are lots of different ways of doing this. You might want to use some little tiny cutters, like the little squirrel and bird and a heart that I've got here. Or you might want to use nail art molds. These are fantastic. I love how cute these little mushrooms are. They're so adorable. Or these are finishing touches molds from Cool Tools, and they come in lots of different types. You can have everything from a bee to seashells to dots, everything. They're really lovely. And a tissue blade, because we're going to be using that to scrape off the excess clay. With textures, you have so many different options that you can use for texture. So see what you have at home and around you to make your texture pieces. You might want to use some leather or material. You may want to use wallpapers. This is great because it's free and they come in so many different textures. So I'm quite often found in the local hardware store, not mentioning any names, raiding the wallpaper samples aisle. You may, if you're a paper crafter, have some of these at home. They are actually embossing folders, and I love these because they're double-sided. So I actually use that for my honeycomb pendant, and as you can see, it's got a texture on both sides because it folded it over and it textured it both sides, which is just lovely. Really love those. Or you may have some texture mats. So these are rubber texture mats. They do take a little bit of sticking to the clay. They do tend to love the clay, sometimes a little bit too much. So you may, if you have these, you will need to use some release agent. I find that the lump release agent like Badger Balm works a little bit better on these. You really want to massage that in to all of the detail because they do have a habit of sticking to these, which is really annoying when you're working with them, but they come up with some beautiful, beautiful textures, so it's worth it in the end. You will also need all of your firing equipment, so your torch. I use a tile to fire on just for safety. You also need your brass or steel brush and your fire brick and some reverse action tweezers and goggles, obviously safety first. To finish off, you're going to need a burnisher, some refining things. So Kernowcraft has a lovely little kit of 3M papers, which is lovely to sand. Some sanding pads in fine and medium grit. This is a healing tool, so if when your clay is dry it's got any cracks or anything, this is great to refine and smooth those. When your pieces are fired and patinaed, using pro polishing pads really are a fabulous way to knock off the bits that you don't want and have that lovely shine in the certain areas that you do want. You'll also need a heat-proof container, such as a jar, some hot water, we'll need that a bit later, some liver of sulphur, and a little pot of cold water. So the very first thing we're going to do is and it's really important, whatever you're working with silver clay, it's really important to do this. And it's just to add a little bit of release agent, a bit of lubrication to whatever the clay is going to be touching, because it does sometimes stick and you don't want that. And because it's springtime and because I'm an absolute nature lover, I'm going to actually use some leaves as a texture today, because I really like the idea of being able to use things that we have to hand as opposed to spending a fortune on different things. So I'm going to use a little bit of release agent just on my mat here and on my roller. We don't need masses amount, we just need a tiny bit. We're not cooking chips, as I tend to say to my students, we're just adding a little tiny bit. Now leaves, they tend to have quite a lot of oil on naturally anyway, so I'm not worried too much about these. But if I was to use the texture mats or the wallpaper, I would obviously use a little bit more. So I'm going to take my clay and I'm going to roll it into a little ball. I'm using both my spaces to start with because I want to keep it nice and smooth and evenly distributed. So I'm going to just give it a little roll. I like to pick it up, turn it and roll the other way just to make it nice and even. I'm going to get rid of my 3 playing card sticks because that's a little bit thin at the moment. I will need those later. And then I'm going to place my clay on top of my leaf because I want the texture on the back. And then I'm going to use this lovely fern. It's beautiful, my favourite ferns. And I'm just going to place it down. I like to just push it down in place. I'm not putting much, I don't want to put my fingerprints on this. I'm not pushing hard. I'm just making sure that it doesn't curl up. And I'm going to roll once with conviction. Now this works the same way if you use your wallpaper samples or if you use your texture mats. It all works the same way to have that texture on both sides. And I'm just going to hold this up to the camera so you can see that gorgeous leaf. And this is going to be absolutely stunning when we add a patina to this a bit later. And then the back texture, ooh, look at that, lovely. So I'm going to use my templates, but you can also use cutters if you wish. So to use my template, I'm going to just add a little bit of oil. This is just a sponge with some oil. Now I like this because it bounces off and it's a good way of getting into my needle tool to make sure that that is lubricated enough that it's going to glide through that clay beautifully. I'm just going to line up my template and holding my needle tool perpendicular, go all the way around and cut that out. And there we go. So this is stage 1 of the process. Get rid of that excess clay. And I'm just going to keep that wrapped up because I want to keep that nice and moist. And there we go. So this is the first bit. Now I'm going to put that to dry. So I like to use my cup warmer to do that. So that is now to dry. So while my backplate is drying, I'm now going to make my embellishments. So there are a few different ways you can do that. You might want to use a little cutter. So I've just pre-oiled my little cutter, and you can even actually use texture on this too. So I'm going to actually use a little bit of wallpaper. I'm only going to texture one side to this because I'm going to do my little tiny squirrel that I have here. He's very cute. I'm going to zoom in for you so you can see my little tiny squirrel. So I'm going to take my clay. I'm going to roll it back into the ball. And while you're not using your clay, it's super important just to keep that wrapped up so it keeps it nice and moist. So I'm just going to roll it out. And I'm going to lay the texture on top. I don't need to do 2 sides for this because it's going to obviously stick to my back plate. So I've textured with my wallpaper. Here's my lovely texture. So we always texture first, cut second. And as you can see, I've added some oil onto my little squirrel cutter because I don't want it to stick. I'm just going to put down and give it a little cut. Give it a little wiggle. Sometimes they get stuck like they have now. How cute. So if they get stuck, just take your paintbrush and gently go around the edges and he should pop out. Come on, little squirrel. There we go. So you can use these little tiny cutters to add very cute little friend to your piece. Or you may want to use these texture mats. I'm just going to put him to one side. Now these little textures, these little molds are fantastic for adding such detail. I love them very much. So a little word of thumb, with these ones you don't need to oil. With these ones you don't need to oil. So I'm just going to take a little bit of clay and I'm going to put it into my bee. Now there's a lot there. It's too much there. So what I'm going to do is take my tissue blade or my blade, kidney blade, and I'm just going to push down and across. So I'm pushing down and I'm flicking across. And what this does is it keeps all of that clay within the parameter of the mold. This is, with these tiny ones, it's really important to do this because if you have excess, you're going to have to cut them down. And they're so small, you're never going to be able to do that. So it's really important to keep it within the shape that you are moulding. I'm going to just do a little mushroom because I just think this is so cute. I'm just going to choose which one I'm going to do. Let's have a look. I'm going to do this one here. So again, I'm just pushing it in using my thumb to put it all in. And you can see there, that's way too much. So what I'm going to do is take this blade and just scrape off the excess. And I'm going to keep them in these molds to dry because when they're in the molds to dry, they'll just pop out really nicely. So I'm going to put that to dry. And so while that's drying, I'm also going to show you how to make these adorable little, I call them barnacles. They do look like barnacles. I'm going to put one on my finger to be able to show you. Little barnacles. And you can actually just spend an afternoon making embellishments and popping them in a pot to dry. And then when they are dry, you can just leave them in there until you're ready to use them. So to make these little barnacles, I'm just going to take a little pinch of clay, going to roll it into a ball. And then I'm going to take my dotting tool. Now I like these, there are lots of different sizes of these. So for bigger ones, you've got the bigger ball. And for the smaller ones, you've got the smaller one. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to give it a little rock and pop it down. And there you go. And like I said, you can use these to even add a little bit of colour into there. If you know how to enamel, you can use a little bit of enamel in there. And I like to make a few of these in different sizes, just to add interest. So I'm just going to take a little bit of clay, give it a little roll. You might want to roll it in your fingertips. I find that really hard. I personally prefer on the palm of my hand. But you do however you feel comfortable. I'm just going to take the dotting tool again, and there we go. And it's always good to have little tiny embellishments like these and to do balls. If you don't want to do the dot in the middle, you want just a little ball, just going to literally roll it and pop it to dry. Like I said, I like to have lots of different embellishments pre-made because then you've got them all there. I keep them in a little pot. They don't hurt to have for whenever you're ready. Just be mindful if you're using the clay, if you're rolling it in your hands, you might need to rehydrate it because it might get a little bit dry, especially if you're rolling it, making little balls. So to rehydrate, you're just going to take your clay, roll it into a ball, flatten it down, add a little bit of water onto your finger Don't squirt it into the clay. If you squirt it directly onto the clay, it's going to be a very messy mess. So we're just going to take a little bit onto our finger, like this. And then I'm going to just fold. And if you watch Great British Bake Off, this process is called laminating. So I'm just literally folding it and folding it. And I'm putting it to one side. So you need to make sure you've got enough clay for your embellishments and your bail as well as your back piece. So if you're making a bigger piece, then obviously you're going to need more clay. Just going to keep that nice and wrapped up and to one side. So that's going to be for my bail. So I'm going to now pop all of my embellishments onto my heater, and we will deal with those a bit later. So while our embellishments and the back plates are drying, the next stage is to make our bail. So to make the bail, I'm just going to take a little bit of clay. I'm going to roll it into a ball, pop it down. I like to make it into like a little almost sausage shape actually, because I want it to be long. So it's always handy to start off with this kind of shape. Now I'm actually going to texture my bail with the leaf. So it's got the same texture on the back as on the bail. So I'm just going to roll my clay out and I'm going to roll it down to 3 cards thick. Then I'm going to lay my leaf on the top. I'm going to try and line it up so it's in the middle, but we'll see. I'm going to roll it once with conviction. There we go, we've got a lovely leaf texture there. And then what I'm going to do, I like this particular shape for my bails, but you can also get bail templates too. Or you may want to just cut it yourself, like so, using your blade, and add a little point, or even keep it rounded. It's entirely up to you. So I'm just going to cut off the excess. Keep those bits to one side because every little counts. It's all very precious. Or if I was to use my template, I would lay that on. So you can either free cut it like I just have here, or if you want to use a template, you can use a template. And just as we did before, we're going to cut around it, holding our needle tool perpendicular. Cut away the excess. It's really crucial that your clay is well hydrated at this point, because what we're going to be doing, we're going to be taking our little straw, and I'm going to add a little bit of release agent to my straw. So I don't want that sticking. And I'm going to be picking up my clay and folding it over my straw. Like so. And I want it so it's almost touching but not quite, because what's going to happen, and in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one that I made earlier that's already dry, and here's a back plate that I made earlier. So once they're dry, that's going to slide on there. So it's important that you've not got too much of a gap, that it fits snugly, but you don't want to be stretching this either, because it will break, or it could break. So we're just going to put that to one side to dry. Just folding it so it's almost touching. You may even want to use your spacer with the depth that you used here, just to lay in between the layers of your bail, like that, and leave that to dry. Be careful if you're using plastic and you're putting it on the heat, because obviously you don't want your lovely spacers to melt. So there we go. I'm just going to pop that to dry. So when everything is dry, the next stage is refining. So with your little molds, once they're dry, these should just pop out really nicely. And the little ones, if you have kept them within the parameter of the thing that you're molding, they shouldn't need much in the way of refining, because they should already be kind of quite tidy around the edges. If you've put too much clay in and you've gone over, you will have to do a little bit of refining, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to take my back plate. So this is the lovely little leaf piece that I made earlier. So I'm going to sand it with a little bit of fine sandpaper. And I'm obviously not going to take off my texture. So if you've got any texture, you're not going to do this on the front. You're just going to do around the edges and anywhere that's a bit rough. I'm supporting my piece because at this stage it is delicate and it can easily break. I also like to use a dry brush just to brush off any of the excess. There's a medium one there. I've got a little dink there, but I'm not worried too much because I'm going to be adding embellishments. I'm going to be covering that bit with that. And these are brilliant 3M papers that are from Kernowcraft, and they're in order, which is really helpful. So we start off with the green. And again, I'm being really careful not to go over my little leaf that I've added as a detail. I don't want to lose that lovely texture, but I do want it smooth on the areas that are not the leaf. And however it is before firing with the refining is how it's going to be after. So refining is a super important stage. So with these 3M papers, you use them one way and then you go through the grits and then you do it the other way to get it nice and smooth. They can also be used on fired clay as well. I'm just going to go through the grits until I'm happy. If you've got an area that is you're not particularly happy with and it's not smoothing even after the grits, I'm going to show you how to use the healing tool shortly. Just going onto the red, and you can see it's already really smoothing out beautifully. And then the mint. I'm just supporting it all the time as I'm going around. And the back I'm not going to do because I've got that lovely texture on the back. And that's the great thing, if you texture both sides, you don't have to spend hours refining, which is a good way to do it. So if I have a little area that I'm not happy with, if you've got a little hairline mark, I'm just going to use my healing tool and some water. I'm going to pop some water on my mat, rub it in, and I'm literally, as you can see here, I'm just going to be moving those molecules of silver, and there you go, look, it's already going. I'm just rubbing that in until that's all absorbed into the clay. There you go, nice and smooth. And I'm going to now take the straw out of my bale really gently, really carefully, and I'm just going to do the edges of this. I'm not going to worry too much because it's really very fragile and we want to be super careful. So I'm just doing the edges. I'm actually even going to use my healing tool just to smooth that out. The healing tool is great for this because if you don't want to do lots of rough refining, it's a great way to smooth the edges without taking anything away. I'm just moving the molecules of silver around. I am not taking anything off. Whereas with the sand pads, it takes the material away. So again, that's nice and smooth. There we go. So that's refining. Like I said, these little tiny embellishments shouldn't need any refining because they should be already done. But if you have got slightly rough edges, just sand off some of the edges a little bit. But just be careful when you're doing these tiny things because they are fragile. So once everything is refined and ready to go, we're going to construct. And this is when it starts to really come together as a piece. So I would lay everything out first. So really get an idea before you start sticking things together where you want things to go. So I've just very gently slid the back plate here into my bail, just so I can see I want my bail there. And it's a good idea when you're using embellishments and when you're using anything connecting to the silver clay to add elements to add strength. So for example, I might want to use some of my little, they look like lichen. I'm going to use tweezers to pick them up because it's a little bit easier. So I might use one of these just to add strength on where I'm going to connect it. So I'm just laying everything out before I stick it on as to where I think they look nice. Got my little toadstool here. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes you might want more things. Sometimes you might think, oh, actually, I'm not too keen on that one there, but that looks good there. So get an idea of where you want everything placed before you start to stick everything on. Because once it's on, it's on. There's really not much you can do about it then. So I also think the power of 3 works quite well from a design perspective. They're odd numbers like this. I'm quite happy with this arrangement. I've got my lovely subtle fern in the back, and then I've got a couple of toadstools and some leaves. I really like that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just kind of make a note of where I've put everything. Might be handy to take a photograph of it as well, so you can see, you know, and then I'm just going to pop those onto one side. The first thing I'm going to do is attach that bail. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water here to my mat, and I'm going to just add a little bit of water onto the back plate and onto the inside of my bail. And that bail's got a nice curvature on that side actually, so. Then I'm just going to get some silver clay paste. This is art clay paste. And it's 999 as well, so it works brilliantly. And you really do need, when you're adding attachments, you need a generous amount. Don't be stingy with how much paste you're using. You really want to add a good amount. So I'm going to add a little bit back in front, and I'm just going to slide that back in place, give it a little wiggle, and a little squeeze, laying it flat. And I'm just going to take the excess of that clay around in the edges, and with the bell you really want to go on the inside as well. Tidy that paste up at this point, because it will, otherwise you'll have to refine all of the lovely work that you've just done. So I like to take a little damp paintbrush and just make sure that's all in place. And then I'm going to pop that to dry. Back on the heater to dry for a few minutes before I start adding any other embellishments. So now my veil is dry. I'm just going to take a little bit extra paste, and on the inside here I'm just going to add a little layer, because it's really important. This veil is going to be holding your piece. It's going to be where the chain is thread through, so it's really important that this is really stuck together. And if you've got any areas where you can see gaps, you want to add a little bit of paste on there and make sure that is nicely supported. So once that's all dry, again, so put it back on for a few minutes. It doesn't take long at this stage to dry in those in-between bits. So once that's dry, we're then going to start sticking on our embellishments. So I've already had an idea of where I want to put these. So again, it's exactly as we did with the veil. I'm just going to take some of this muddy water here actually. I'm just going to add the area where I'm going to add my toadstools. I sometimes like to pick it up with a paintbrush actually, if I don't want to touch it. Add some of that on the back. Add a little bit of paste. It's very fiddly, this bit. I'm going to stick that on. Going around the edges to make sure that it's really, really stuck down well. Just like that. And then I'm going to take my next one. I'm just going to build up. Add a little bit of water. I'll put some more up here actually so you can see. A bit of water. On the paste. And you almost want that paste to squidge out of the sides to know that you've got enough. It's really important to have a good connection. Then I like to take some wetter paste around the edges and just make sure that it's really attached nicely. And you're just going to keep going until all of the embellishments that you want are in the place that you want them. And like I said, I really would urge you to, especially around your bail, to add some embellishments just for strength. A little bit of paste under there. You can dry in between as well if you wish. Little leaf. Just going to keep going around all of them and tidying up the excess as I go as well, because I really don't want to have to do much more in the way of refining. When it's completely dry before fired, I will just check it and make sure that I'm happy with everything, happy where I had all of my paste added, just to make sure. They're so fine and delicate. I said you might feel that you want to use the tweezers. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. There's no right or wrong way. Oh, there's a little bumblebee here. Should we add a little bumblebee for fun? What do you think? A little bumblebee, or maybe another leaf. Like I said, I'd already had a little plan. Sometimes as you're sticking it on there, you might change your plan halfway through. And that's okay too. All part of the creative process. So I'm quite happy with how that is looking now. So I'm just going to make sure all of my edges are nice and smooth, that I haven't got any, oh dear, I don't want to drop it at this point, any gaps underneath the embellishments and the back plate. I'm going to make sure that's all nice and looking good. And then I'm going to pop that back onto dry. It's super important, it's essential actually that it's completely dry before firing. So I would now keep that to dry for a good 10-15 minutes on my heater, or if you're drying it by air, 48 hours. 24 absolute min, because you really want to make sure it's completely dry before we fire, especially if it's quite a large piece like this one. So I'm going to pop that on to dry, and then I'm going to just check that I'm happy with it all and refine it one last time before firing. So once your piece is all completely dried, I'm just going to double check everything, check that I'm happy with it. If it needs any extra refining, I would just refine a little bit at this stage before firing. It's really important that your piece is completely dry as well before we fire. So once you've taken it off your heat source, if you just pop it onto a mirror, if it leaves like a sweaty mark, then it's not dry. So pop it on for a little bit longer because it's really important. If it's not fully dry, it can leave bubbles in your clay and it can actually explode. So we don't want that, not to scare you, but we definitely don't want that. So just make sure that it's dry and make sure you're completely happy with all the refining before you fire. So safety first, I have my goggles. I have my goggles on. I have my fire station on a fireproof surface. I have everything ready. My torch is filled up. I have everything flammable out of the way. No children or pets in the vicinity. In order to fire with the torch, it's really important that it's a dimly lit room. So I'm also now going to be turning my light off, because it's really important that I see this change of colour. It's still quite bright in here in the studio, so in an ideal room I would have it really, really darkened so I can see that change of colour. What's going to happen is I'm going to keep my torch at a 45-degree angle. This is super important because you don't want the flame to bounce back. We're going to keep it at a reasonable distance. It's going to catch a light. It's meant to, that's the binder burning off. When that binder burns away, what's going to be happening is those silver molecules are going to be pulling together and making it pure silver. So, here we go. I'm going to ignite my torch. And here comes the flame. Nice flame, there we go. Then it will start to go white and then it will start to glow. And when it's glowing, that's when we're going to time for 3 minutes. I can see the glow happening now. And we're looking for a lovely peachy glow. We don't want it to go too red. We want it nice and peachy glow. Move your torch around as it's going. If your piece is quite long, what might happen is it might curl at the edges, but that's absolutely okay, that's not a problem. That's just because it's shrinking, and then it will then soon settle back down. And this process is called sintering. You can see that glowing beautifully. Like I said, in a darkened room is always the best place to fire. 3 minutes is a long time when you're firing. But it's really important to fire for that full amount of time. Do check your clay if you're using a different brand. It's different firing schedules might be on your brand, and some of them might not be able to be torch fired. The majority can nowadays, but do check with the manufacturer on your packet to see what it says. So we're nearly there, another minute. And you can't overfire, so if in doubt, if your piece is a little big, then do fire for a little bit longer than the 3 minutes. It won't hurt it if you fire for a bit longer. Firing it for too hot is more of an issue. And what you're looking out for there is if you get any little flicks of silver, little flashes in your silver, then that's an indication that it's too hot. If it starts to glow red as opposed to a peachy glow, then that's also an indication that it's too hot. And then you just need to move your hand back a little bit with your torch. So nearly there. This is the exciting bit. So when it is fired, it will be white. And that's absolutely okay. That's the crystalline sort of surface And all that is, that's just the molecules of those silver, and they're all standing to attention. So once you've fired your piece, don't think, oh gosh, it's not looking silver. It's absolutely normal, and it will become silver, and I will show you how that magic works in just a second. We're nearly there, and I can already see how this has shrunk. And I really want to make sure, because I've got quite a lot of 3D elements on my piece, I really want to make sure that that is fired right the way through and nice and solidly. So, nearly done. There we go, right. So, now what I'm going to do, I've got some water here, it's just cold water. Now, if you have added any fireable stones like this one, now obviously we will be going into detail on how to add those at a later date in another series, but if you have any stones, you would not quench it after firing. They are special heat-proof stones, so they can be fired with a torch, but you would definitely not quench those because they will go into thermal shock. But because I don't have any stones on this piece, I'm going to pop it into the water. Oh, love that sound. And it is now pure silver. So here's the piece, all fired. And like I said, you can see it's that white crystalline solution, but that's fine, because what we're going to do is we're going to take our brass brush or our steel brush, and we're going to give it a really good brush up now. Careful, these bristles can be quite sharp. But as you can see, the magic, it's already starting to become shiny and silver. Just going to move my liver of sulfur out the way. I like to use, this is just a sponge pad. It's actually to stop washing machines vibrate and making a noise, but it works really well to just be able to have a surface that you can brush up your silver clay on. And look at that, check out that silver and those details already. Now I'm going to make that pop with a patina in just a second. There we go, I'm going to brush it all up. Now before patinaing, we're just going to give it a brush and a burnish. Now this is my favourite, it's an agate burnisher, but you can also use a metal burnisher if you wish. But I personally love my agate burnisher. And I'm just going to polish up the high points. I can take off my goggles now, I'm not sure why I've still got them on. I'll take those. So just do the top of my mushroom, top of my leaves, just going around in a little circle. It just really brings them up super duper shiny. Oh, this is looking lovely. And those edges where I want it nice and smooth. Taking really good care not to scratch off any of those textures. I just want it to have those leaves really popping in the background of my piece. So when we're ready to patina, we need to make sure it's all brushed up and ready to go. You want to use plastic or stainless steel tweezers, and what's basically the patina does is oxidizes your piece. So I like to add it just a little tiny bit. Can you see it's starting to go copper? If I add a little bit more, it will go darker. And that's got a really lovely colour. So I'm just going to pop that into some water. Just got some cold water here. So I'm going in between the two just to see. And already, I can turn the light on now, you can see how dark that is going already. And the more I dip, the darker it will go. So when you're happy with the darkness that you have, with the depth of colour, or the depth of the patina, I'm just going to dry it off. And then I'm going to use my Pro polishing pads to get rid of the excess areas that I really don't want. So I, for example, would like my leaf to be dark, but around the edges, I don't want it. So I'm going to literally just use my Pro polishing pads to knock off that colour that I don't want. I like to push on my pad while I'm doing this. And if you don't like the effect, you can just run your torch, so get it nice and dry, and then just add your piece onto your fire block and just use your torch just to heat it a little, and that will burn off the excess. That will burn it away, so you can get rid of it. Or you might want it a bit darker. So there we go, and already you can see how it's making those details pop. Now I decided I want it a little bit darker on those leaves, so I'm going to dunk it again. You can also use a paintbrush and paint it on. That's another way of doing it. You can see at the back how it's gone really almost blue colours. I love it. A little bit more. Oh, that's gone really, and as it starts to cool, you will find that the patina changes, and it's not quite as potent as it gets cooler. So it's good to work with it when it's fresh. A little bit more. I like to just keep checking as I'm going. This is coming out really purpley. Look at those colours. I hope you can see them. Just adding some water in between just to stop it from activating. It's almost like a petrol-y bluey colour there. That's fantastic. I'll dunk it once more just to see if I can get it a little bit darker. It's just started to cool off a little bit, which is why it's not going as dark as I am intending. There we go, that's better. So I'm happy with that. That's getting really nice and dark. It's almost purpley within that area where the leaves are, which I really love. So I'm going to just add some water, dry it again, and again, just give it a little polish. These Pro polishing pads don't like it if your piece is wet, so make sure you dry it thoroughly before you use them to knock off the excess patina, because they won't like it. There we go, that's better now. That's really, detail is really starting to pop. I'm just going to go around in circle motion just to polish that up. If you've got a radar polisher, you can use that as well at this point. It's obviously solid silver, so you polish up just as you would. I'm just knocking off any excess of that silver, of that patina on the silver that I just don't want in certain areas. And then I'm going to use my burnisher and just go over that with my burnisher. Again, just to make those high points really, really shine. And take all the time you need for this stage, because you know the refining stage is important to get it looking really good. There we go. So I hope you enjoyed my tutorial on how to use textures, make embellishments and bails, and a little bit of patina. I would absolutely love to see all of the pieces that you're making whilst you're working along with me. So please do share on social and tag me and Kernowcraft in. We really would absolutely love to see all of your work. Thank you so much, and I'm very much looking forward to the next episode. I'll see you next month. Bye.